Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. Thank you so much for joining us this evening, and welcome to the first session of our three-part series on mental wellness. Before I introduce our speaker for tonight, I wanted to speak briefly about what brought about this idea of discussing mental wellness. As Director of Education, the mental well-being of the students of ISM and all the children of our community is always on my mind. But speaking more broadly, as it affects our entire community, young and old alike, there is a need to demystify issues of mental health and maintaining wellness as it is connected to our spiritual well-being and how we conduct our daily lives as mothers, fathers, students, neighbors. And it is our hope that with this series, we can promote self-reflection and confront some of these topics, which are often ignored until they become unbearable. Also to foster a sense of empathy amongst the community and view each other with some understanding and grace so that we can maybe become that friend that sees a person who needs help. And finally, to help individuals understand when to get help for themselves and their families. For the Q&A portion of tonight's session, if you haven't submitted your questions already, feel free to send questions into the YouTube chat, and we'll do that after our alim is done speaking. Without further ado, I would like to introduce our speaker for tonight, who actually needs no introduction. And it is only fitting that we start our first wellness session with an alim who does not mince words and tells it like it is. Maulana Syed Jafri from Toronto, welcome.
Thank you very much for the introduction. I'll make sure I don't mince my words tonight either, inshallah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله الذي لا يبلغ مدحته القائلون ولا يحصي نعماءه العادون ولا يؤدي حقه المجتهدون الذي لا يدركه بعد الحمم ولا يناله غوص الفطن ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين حبيب قلوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا وشفيع ذنوبنا سيدنا ومولانا أبي القاسم محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم وعلى بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين لا سيما بقية الله في الأرضين صاحب العصر والزمان خليفة الرحمن إمام الإنس والجان ولعن الله أعداهم أجمعين إلى يوم الدين أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. First of all praise is due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We are thankful towards Him for giving this opportunity, this chance for us to gather and discuss a few things that might benefit us as individuals, families, and the community at large. I am grateful and always humble when the community out in Dallas, the Moment Center, contacts me to take part in a program there in the community. And, I want to first of all recognize and express my appreciation really to the ISM team, to Sister Farah and her team for having this wellness series, and the fact that they reached out to me to be the first speaker is a lot of pressure, but at the same time I am very, very honored, very humbled, and I'll tell you why I am almost congratulating them as a team. Because I find that they were able to identify some of the needs of the community and move away from the status quo of the programs and address those really difficult topics properly, right? Through the lens of Islam, in a very open dialogue, a chance for you to ask questions. And I think that it's important that as communities across North America, really across the globe now, We have to begin to tackle this issue of mental wellness or mental health, as it's called, directly. Now, it's a massive topic and one that I think requires a 10-day ashra, really. In my 35 to 40-minute presentation today, I just wanted to clarify a couple of things, make a couple of points, inshallah, to build off of Sister Farah's intro. And then, inshallah, I would like to hear some of the questions that you have on your mind. The first thing that I would like to do is remove this mental taboo that we have. And I'm going to be a little bit direct, if you don't mind. The Moment Center knows me very well, and I know them very well. There is no takallufat, there's no formalities. I don't need to sit there and, this and that. I can come straight at you, and it comes from a very loving place. I would like to think that I've earned my status to be either a brother or a son of yours in your community. And so, it comes from a very loving place. But I find that in my discussions, especially since the pandemic hit, and I think we've been in lockdown. I mean, I've been grounded, at least in terms of my travel, since mid-March. And I remember having, a very nice discussion, a program called The Beauty of Seclusion with the Moment Center in April. But I find that this mental health taboo, this mental health discussion, it's still not being discussed the way it should be discussed. And there's reasons for that. One of the main reasons I find is the lack of empathy, number one, the lack of understanding of this generation that we live in, and the fact that I think we're quick to judge people and label them as overdramatic, hypersensitive, dramatic, maybe, And so these discussions, I think that by those who may reject this idea of anxiety and stress, these programs, speakers like me, we are sometimes seen as, and people have said this to me to my face, that we coddle this dramatic generation of ours that we live in. And in the process, we're not helping them grow. We're coming in as a helicopter and it's kind of like, and saving the day or trying to save the day. Now, the group that I want to kind of pick on, with all due respect, are the elders, of course, right? And this is more or less in the Desi and Dopak communities, those elders that are immigrants that have come from India, Pakistan. This phenomena of mental health now that really have kind of, it's kind of exploded in the past 5-10 years. And now we kind of see it in Hollywood, we see it in sports with celebrities that you would think have everything at their disposal, and they do. They come out, like DeMar DeRozan, like Kevin Love, like all these NBA players are coming out and talking about the fact that, this is, I battle with depression and stress all the time. And the problem is that there is this denial of this science in today's day and age, this flat out rejection of it. This, shrug your shoulders and smirk and, come on, man, really? Like, you're stressed, you're anxious. And part of that comes from the fact that, growing up, my immigrant parents out there, and you know me very well. I come from a typical Karachi background. My parents, migrated from Karachi to Toronto in the early 70s, and my parents were typical. There was a typical Pakistani home in my home growing up. And my father would share with me stories about the interaction between him and his father, meaning my dada, my grandfather. And it was very, very limited. The interaction was very limited. And part of it was the fact that there simply wasn't a culture back then to identify your anxiety, identify your stress, identify your depression, 16, 17 years old. I could picture my father going to his father saying, at 17, Dad, I'm depressed, I'm anxious, I'm stressed. Can you help me out? What do I do? My grandfather, and not any fault of his, that's just a product of his zamana and his era and his culture, would sit there and say, what are you stressed about? You're 17. There's no mortgage, there's no family to feed, there's no job to uphold. You're asked to do one thing, that's study. What are you stressed about? And right away, this dismissive attitude towards it actually adds to the problem, right? And what we're doing is we are trying to compare eras and generations. And that's the number one mistake that we have when it comes to mental wellness. This generation that we live in and the product of that, the millennials today, or whatever, Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z, I can't keep up nowadays, whatever it is, the younger ones, 15, 18, 21, 28, they live in a different era altogether than even when I lived. And I was born and raised in Toronto. To date myself and to kind of, make sense of these white hairs on my beard, there wasn't any social media for me growing up as a teenager. I didn't go through high school with Instagram and Snapchat and all these different. I didn't go through this era of branding and consumerism and validation and trying to keep up and trying to be relevant constantly. You know how hard that is. But these kids today go through that, and it's bound to add to your stress and to your anxiety. So the first thing that I'm going to ask to my elders out there, and this goes to the execs and the board at Moment Center, not just Moment, any other board out there for any community. And I am encouraged to see that this program is happening at Moment. That means that the board and the executives were able to see the relevance of this topic and the importance of this discussion, so they agreed to have this 3-part wellness series. But I will say that give this some priority. Realize that there are people in your community that are quietly suffering, and they're the young ones. Pick up on the signs. Look for things that might be a little bit of an eye-opening reality for all of you, and then invest in that. If that means more of these discussions, maybe not once a year, maybe 3 or 4 times a year, maybe having a panel discussion, maybe having inshallah, when the doors are open at Moment inside. I know you've been having your programs outside. I've been stalking you on YouTube, but maybe once inside, you can have some experts. Mashallah, the DFW community is filled with experts and all sorts of individuals who are highly capable and very, very educated and very successful in this field of social work and mental health, et cetera, et cetera. So the first thing I'm going to say is that let's remove the taboo. Let's stop assuming that I was 17 once as well. You were 17 once, but you were 17 back then. You weren't 17 now. And yes, we have to accept the fact that this is a different generation altogether. First thing. The second thing is that what sometimes is discussed is that stress and anxiety, depression is a sign of the weakness of one's iman. Okay. I think part of the reason why a lot of our kids today who are quietly suffering are not speaking out is because they really fear judgment. And they'll be told that, look, if you were a better believer, if you read Quran more, if you read namaz more, you wouldn't be in this predicament. You wouldn't be taking antidepressant pills. You wouldn't be seeing a psychiatrist twice or 3 times a week, right? If only you were a better servant. So now, not only are they dealing with their anxiety and depression, but now they have this immense guilt at the fact that I'm just not good to God either, right? And bit by bit now, their self-worth, their self-love, their self-image now begins to deteriorate. Okay. The reality is, and I want to spend tonight talking a little bit about removing this idea that if you are a good person, then you don't go through anxiety and depression. If you are a good servant of God, that makes you immune to society and to stress, anxiety, and depression. And I'll give you examples historically from the Quran tonight to make sure that we understand that sometimes the greatest people, the greatest creations of God went through mental health issues. That might be blasphemous for me to say and for you to hear, but it's true. And I'll back it up. Just give you a moment. I'll back it up. But this notion that simply say, look, read a few more tasbihs. Yes, there is the portion of spirituality for sure. But as I often say, and everywhere I go, I talk about dua and dua, right? As Sister Farah said in the intro, making sure that you're getting the proper help. Okay, that's not just calling someone like me and saying, "Can you give me a dua to?" Say, yes, that's part of it. The other portion is professional help. Recognizing that there's something isn't right inside of me. Picking up the symptoms for your child. I've had so many parents call me and say, Maulana, he was a milinsar bacha. He was so social. He was this and that. He was a life of the party. Up to bilkul khamosh ho gaya. He doesn't say anything. He goes in his room and I don't know what he does, and he comes back down to eat. His head's down, put back up. He's gotten a little bit, and I was like, and just kind of like, khamosh mizaj ho gaya. He's not khamosh mizaj. This is not all of a sudden a change in personality. There's something going on inside of his life. That's a very prominent sign and a symptom that something's not right. And now it's up to us as parents to kind of probe into it and look into it to say, how can I get my child the help that they need? But this idea and this notion that we just drill them that, look, you're just not a good servant of God. Had you been like this, then it wouldn't have happened. Because we always see depression, anxiety, stress, and mental well-being, or the lack of mental well-being, to be a sign of weakness. And so naturally, when that's presented to an 18-year-old who is struggling with self-image issues, who is struggling with being relevant, who is struggling with body issues, like feeling ugly, for example, not being relevant, for example, right? All these things, then why would they share anything with their parents, right? The reality is, and I'll give you a couple of examples. The first example I'll give you is Bibi Maryam. Bibi Maryam, in Surah Maryam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala captures a moment now, okay? She's pregnant with Nabi Isa, alayhi salam. And she's about to deliver. She's going through a contraction. She has her labor pains. And she grabs some comfort on the base of a date palm tree, okay? Dates fall down on her, as the Quran says, of course, and she has a few dates, and it kind of comforts her, but still the pain is very difficult to bear. As men, we can never understand the pains of labor that a woman goes through. But look at the way that the Quran captures this moment. It captures a moment that Bibi Maryam, now in the intensity of the pain, now she has this talk with herself. Okay? And she says one statement, Ya laytani, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Ya laytani mittu qabla hadha. Wa kuntu nasiyan mansiya. It's a very interesting verse. Oh, woe unto me. So now she feels a little bit of self-pity. Okay? Mittu qabla hadha. If only I was dead before this happened. Before what happened now? She's going through intense pains. The pains are so severe. And I've heard from my wife, I've heard from others who have given birth, that literally you see death in front of you when you're giving birth. And now, I mean, I could never understand that, but this is now all of a sudden this verse I stumble upon, and she's saying this statement that maybe for you and I could be, oh my goodness, that's blasphemous. Right? I've seen it with my own eyes that a woman who's about to deliver, and she's fighting the pains. She shows signs of frustration, or maybe she lets out a statement that could that could be challenging. Let's say God, for example, and the ones around her, her mom or her mother-in-law or her sisters, saying, "Look, don't say that. It's not good. I mean, you don't want to be ungrateful, right? This is a very special moment for you, right?" And all she can think about is just breathe through the pain. Here we have Bibi Maryam, one of the 4 greatest women in Islam, the only woman to be mentioned by name in the Quran, the only woman that has a surah named after in the Quran. And Allah takes this statement of hers that says, I'd rather be dead right now than to go through these pains, that maybe, kuntu nasiyan mansiya, maybe I could be something that would be forgotten. I mean, if someone said that in the delivery room, it's like, oh my goodness, astaghfirullah, don't say that. It's not nice. It's a gift from God. Now you're being, it's kufran and ni'mat, you're being ungrateful. But Allah is saying, look, this is a very natural reaction. I mean, it captured a very stressful and anxious moment for Bibi Maryam. And for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to use that as a verse of his in the Quran, oh my goodness. He's sending us a clear message that it's not blasphemous for you to express your anxiety and stress. It's not blasphemous, for you to feel like this. Feelings are there to be expressed, to be understood, right? That's one example. The other example is Prophet Yunus, the very famous whale prophet, who spent some time in the belly of this whale, or mammal, as some say. Again, the Quran captures this moment of darkness very, very well. As you know, that his quote unquote tarke awla, and I don't have time to explain what that term means. Inshallah, you understand what that means. He made a mistake, not a sin. He made a mistake. He was not as patient as he should be with his people. And there was moments of frustration that the Quran talks about. That these people are not listening to me. Now, basically, what Allah did was took him away from that environment and gave him a moment and a place to just calm your nafs down, calm your soul down, and have a moment with yourself. Think about what they're doing. Think about, for example, your child, 8 years old, 9 years old, 10 years old, 7 years old, just has at that moment, a rough day. What I do, I have 3 kids of my own, from 5 to 7 to 12, mashallah. Right? If I see that, for example, in that moment, my 7-year-old is having a breakdown, I literally pick her up and I take her to a different part of the house. I remove her. I can see the stress and anxiety on her face. I can remove her from there and say, look, let's go upstairs. Let's close the door. Let's talk. Right away, the moment she's in a different room in the house and away from the cause of that stress, half of the battle is already done. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with one of his prophets did the exact same thing. Took him and said, look, spend some time in the belly of this whale, in this darkness. Have a moment. I'm not punishing you. You didn't commit a sin. This is not some adab of mine. This is good for you. It's therapeutic for you. And the Quran says, وَظُنُونِ إِذْ ذَهَبَ الْمَغَاضِبًا فَظَنَّ أَنْ لَا نَقْدِرَ عَلَيْهِ فَنَادَى فِي الظُّلُمَاتِ. In that darkness, who calls out? Nabi Yunus calls out, أَنْ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا أَنْتَ سُبْحَانَكَ إِنِّي كُنْتُم مِّنَ الظَّالِمِينَ. Calls out, says, there is no God but you. Glory be to you. If anybody made a mistake, I am the one that made that mistake. Inni kuntu min al-zalimin. I was the one who was wrong in the situation. And the Quran says, we heard his call, we freed him. وَكَذَلِكَ نُنْجِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. And we'll do the exact same thing to the believers. Literally, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took him away from that moment and said, look, just take a moment, man. You're going through a lot right now. Now, this idea of humanizing our prophets and these great women is not blasphemous. It's the deen. These were meant to be role models for us. So please don't hate me and don't turn me off right now because, oh my God, this guy is humanizing the prophets. Yes, they were meant to be humanized. They're rasulan minhum. They're prophets from amongst the people. They're not from a different galaxy altogether. And I have so many other examples. You look at, for example, the night before the 19th of Ramadan, when Amir al-Mu'mineen, is about to go into Masjid of Kufa and be struck with the sword of Ibn Muljim. The reports say that he was at Kulthum's house, his daughter's house. And after iftar that night, Kulthum narrates that I saw Baba get up halfway, in the middle of the night, go out to the sand, the courtyard, look up to the sky, say a few words, then go back forth, or go back and forth to the sand, to his room, his hujra, meaning what? There's a lot of this. He was very, very uncomfortable, not scared. He was bechen, as they say. There was this, he was very just anxious, perhaps is the word. And for me to say that Amir al-Mu'mineen was anxious about anything, again, is not blasphemous. Does it make Khaybar and Khandaq all of a sudden less? No, absolutely not. It doesn't. But yeah, when you find out that he knew that this is going to be my last morning on this earth in terms of being struck with the sword, then maybe that anxiousness that he had was meeting his beloved Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But nonetheless, there are signs of anxiety. The tears of Imam Sajjad for 40 years, 33 years after Ashura, those tears come with certain emotions. Right? I can go on and on and on about so many examples of some of the greatest people God's ever created going through moments of stress and anxiety. It's not just about a lack of iman and faith. It's not just about the fact that read one more page of Quran and all of a sudden, poof, everything will be gone. It's not. It's about you identifying within you something isn't right, and then those around you also identifying that there's something not right. He's not sleeping properly. She's not eating properly. She's become very quiet now, very aloof. Those things that she loves to do, she doesn't want to do. It's okay to ask, is everything all right? Okay, that empathy, the Sister Verda talks about in the intro, that empathy is very, very important. But in this individualistic world, we don't have time to empathize. We're too busy, polishing and strengthening and cleaning the idol called the self inside of us. And these are very, very difficult times. Let's accept the fact that there's nothing normal right now in 2020. As I said, since March until now, the last time I was on a plane, I think, was January. This is the longest that I have been home in terms of, now, I love it. I do. My kids love it. My wife for sure loves it, right? But, this is not the norm. And there are some people, especially my elders, who really, who thrive on the idea of going to the center once a week, once every 2 weeks, for 2 hours. Have a cup of chai, see people, salam, dua, kya hal hai, sab khair, alhamdulillah, that's it. Even that's not there. If it is, it's very limited. You probably can't sit there, even in the parking lot for a moment center too long, right? So these are very difficult times, which means that this is now the time for us to really come together as a community. Pick up the phone, call your elders, ask them, uncle, auntie, are you okay? Anything you need from us, especially those who are vulnerable, those who are high risk, those who maybe perhaps don't have anyone in their home. Can I pick you up some milk and drop it off? Right? If need be, go by their house and just stand in the driveway 6 feet apart and say salam. I just want to see your face. Sometimes that's enough to get it going. The issue is that we have to see this difficulty in this pandemic, and it is a difficulty. There's silver linings everywhere. I talked about those silver linings in my Beauty of Seclusion program, but the reality is that these are very, very difficult days. COVID, depression, the increase of mental health, the increase of anxiety and stress is everywhere. Increase of abuse in our marriages, God forbid, is everywhere. My phone blows up with all sorts of difficult situations. But this is the time now where we need to understand that this is not something that is normal, and so this is our time to pick it up as a community. Reach out to people. Just call to see if you're okay. Maybe talk on the phone. Right? If you're able to have 5, 6 people over, maybe invite one small family over with all the necessary limitations and restrictions. Just have an evening together with tea. Who knows? Sit on the parking lot or on the driveway with your lawn chairs 6 feet apart. Just talk. Right? And especially my elders, it's vital that you guys get out, go for a walk. You're blessed with beautiful weather right now. All year round, really, in Dallas. I imagine it's not that hot right now in Dallas. Relatively speaking, it's always hot for me in Dallas, but for you guys, it may not be. Go for a walk, get out, get some fresh air. Right? Those kind of things are very, very important. I'm not a professional or an expert, but I do know these things help. I also have an elderly mother who is struggling. And because she is a very, very, very community woman, and she, relies heavily on going to the center and going to this, house modalis and this and that, blah, blah, blah. But it's been a very difficult time. Right? So it's important that we reach out. Now, one point I want to make in the end, I have about 10 minutes left. And that is that, and I've said this in April, and I'll say it again, because April was a good, 7 months ago. When things get back to normal, and they will get back to normal, all this talk about Moderna and Pfizer and all these talks about the vaccine and blah, 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 things will eventually get back to whatever that normal is. The centers will be open and you'll be able to go back and forth, blah, blah, blah. I don't want it to be that we are the same after all this whole experience. It can't be the case that we are just simply the same person we have been. It's been a good 7 months that we have been like this. I don't leave my house unless I have to go get groceries. Maybe I go see my mom once in a while, and that's about it. All of our centers programs are online. But the one thing that I want all of you to focus on, and I'll focus on it with you, is this is a good time to do a little bit of self-assessment. One thing that we lack as a community is emotional intelligence, and it's a different topic altogether. And maybe one day I'll recommend to ISM to have a series on emotional intelligence. What does that mean? We have IQ, then we have EQ, right? IQ measures your intelligence, EQ measures your emotions. While we are able to feel the emotion, no problem, we're not able to truly label the emotion. And because we're not able to label the emotion, we're not able to handle the emotion or deal with it, right? We think we're angry, but really, of course, we're scared. We think that we are scared, but really we are, we're worried. We think that we are okay with something, but really it's killing us on the inside. It seems that, this is a concern of mine, but really after some thought, it shouldn't be a concern altogether. Okay. And one of the ways that I want all of you to, especially those of you right now listening to me who maybe are scratching rock bottom, I don't know, maybe are going through your stress and your anxiety, and nobody knows it. I know there's a lot of silent suffering happening in our families, in our marriages, in our community, for sure. There's one example that I had read. I thought that was interesting. I'll share with you guys. There's a professor who entered his class, a teacher's class, and he picked up a bottle of water, right? And he asked the students, how heavy is this bottle of water? Some say 8 ounces, 10 ounces, 12 ounces. And then he asked, does the weight of the bottle of water change over time? Now they're confused. What are you asking us? What kind of a weird question is that? And then he goes on to explain. He says, right now, I lifted up this bottle of water without any problems. But if I was to hold on to this bottle of water for an hour longer, just like this, in this position for 1 hour, all of a sudden, the bottle of water becomes a little bit heavier. My arm begins to now feel it. If I was to hold this bottle of water like this for 10 hours, 12 hours, 24 hours, after a while, my entire arm would be shaking as if I was picking up a massive weight. But the actual contents of the bottle hasn't changed. The weight of the bottle hasn't changed. What has changed is that because you're holding it for that long, it's now become something that is unbearable to hold. You start to lose feeling in your arm. You feel a numbness. All from what? A simple bottle of water. And what is it that would get you through that moment is to put the water bottle down and let go of the water bottle and restore the weight of it. A lot of times when we go through our moments of stress and anxiety, the weight of that moment is nothing more than the weight of a bottle of water. But because we hold on to it for so long, it becomes unbearable for us. Now, if that means that, squashing difficulties between siblings, if that means picking up the phone and calling your first cousin, if that means, apologizing or forgiving, let's say, a spouse or a parent or a child, whatever the case may be, it's important that we let go of the water bottle. If we let go of that stress, then it becomes a little bit bearable. And that means that we have to find an outlet, whatever the outlet is. Growing up, my outlet was writing. I used to write all the time. I used to write all sorts of stuff. Just write it. Yeah? And then, rip it up and burn it or throw it out, whatever you want to do, just write. And I would feel better. Or my outlet was sports growing up. Huge sports fan. I still am. I used to play back then. Now, not so much because, my white hair and my beard. I can play. I just need 2 ice packs and a big ball of Advil, and I'll be fine. But it's important for us to realize that the longer we hold on to those moments, and part of us letting go of the bottle is to find help. It's to seek help. Put away the idea of anyone judging you. This is not about anyone and let them judge you. Who cares? Sorry. It is important that you look after yourself. Self-love and self-care is huge. Even in the deen, Imam Ali says the one who does not have worth of themselves, they'll be destroyed in this world. They will be destroyed in this world. You have to have a sense of self-worth. Part of that is for us to do what? Is to let go of those stresses. Find an outlet. Be forgiving, empathize, sympathize, open the door to dialogue. Check in with your fellow community members. One emoji, one small one-line WhatsApp text, it goes a long way. I can still remember in the beginning of the pandemic, I had so many messages Maulana, are you okay? Anything you need? Random people dropping off stuff. I had one guy drop, I kid you not, he dropped me off a basket in my house. And that basket had nothing but toilet paper, paper towel, tissue paper, wipes, gloves, mask. I was looking for the brownies and the cakes and the cookies, but all PPE stuff. And I thought, you know what? Brilliant. Brilliant. Now's the time for us to truly check, are we a community person or not? Don't leave it up to one or two people. It's not fair on them. They're also going through the same pandemic as we are. Okay. So, in closing, and then I'll open the floor for any questions. It's already been, almost 35 minutes. We want to make sure that we are individuals who, number one, identify that this is not something that is over dramatic. These are not people who are highly sensitive. They're not people who are, who can't handle things properly. They're a bunch of babies, and not at all. This is a different era that we live in, an era of consumerism, an era of branding, an era of like I said, fitting in, an era of relevance. All these things causes a lot of stress for a 16-year-old who simply wants to be relevant. Second thing is to understand that some of the greatest people in this world have gone through moments of stress and anxiety. I gave you examples of Imam Ali, to Bibi Maryam, to Prophet Yunus, all these things. And finally, understand that the longer you hold that avenue of stress and anxiety, the heavier it becomes. Right? And like that ball of water, put it down, let it go, find your outlets. And yes, part of the outlet is spirituality, guys. وَمَن يَتَّقِ اللَّهَ يَجْعَل لَهُ مَخْرَجًا. The one who has piety, Allah says, the one who's God conscious, Allah will create for them a makhraj, an exit, an outlet, a door for them to get through this difficulty. Right? But either as a caregiver, as a parent, as an older sibling, if you see signs in your siblings, in your children, then please pick up those signs, call those who are experts and say, look, this is what I'm noticing. Is this something that's normal, or should I be concerned? If you are somebody right now who's going through your stress and anxiety, please get the help that you need. Dua and dawa, absolutely. Both of them hand in hand, inshallah, will help you get through this difficulty. We ask you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to accept, inshallah, our qaleel efforts. We ask you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to help our communities, to help our families, help our youth during this very difficult time, inshallah, to get through this difficult moment and to hold on to our iman, in fact, strengthen our iman through this pandemic. But finally, we ask you, Allah, give our youth today some of this mental strength that they need to live in a very difficult era. Any questions at all, inshallah? We can open up the floors. I'll put on my eyes to make sure that I can read those questions if they come through the chat. So, Sister Farah, I'm going to pass it back on to you, inshallah.
Thank you so much, Maulana, for that enlightening discussion, especially when you gave the examples of the personalities in the Quran who truly struggled. I think that is a very, human aspect to connect with, and so important when we are struggling through things. Yes. There was a question that came in. Is it absolutely necessary to find a mental health professional who is a Muslim? Because as we know, that might not always be possible. So could you address that, please?
I don't think it's absolutely necessary. I just find that sometimes a lot of our stress and anxiety are from, and maybe I'm being general, are from things that are quote unquote cultural, be it family relationships or the in-laws, for example, or other things, or perhaps, for example, me and God, my lack of spirituality. And I find that unless you yourself are involved in that culture and religion, you may not be able to relate to the person. But no, of course not. There is, I know that it's a rarity sometimes. And if you do have somebody in the DFW area who is a Muslim and who is, an expert in mental health, then you should you should use that resource. You're very, very lucky. But I don't think it's necessary. Maybe sometimes a different perspective is actually pretty, it's quite refreshing.
Thank you. There's another question. At what point should someone get help?
Good question. And again, I don't want to pretend to be an expert, and I'm not an expert, but I do think that if it gets to the point where, you start to isolate yourself, my fear is, and this is really where, I call upon the families, and specifically I call upon the fathers and the husbands of the men of the house. This is really where, as men, we need to step up and create a loving, cultivating environment inside of our home. If that means board game night, if that means, coloring, if that means going for a walk as a family, whatever the case may be, let them believe that maybe the outside world is shut off, but inside, as a tribe, we are stronger than ever. And the disconnect with the community won't be as difficult to bear. But can you imagine now the outside is cut off and the inside is, just 5 roommates living together? They're not a family unit whatsoever. I think that when you wish to be isolated, when you prefer to be alone with your thoughts, I think that's a little bit of a dangerous area. The Holy Prophet says that a person who chooses to be alone as opposed to within a social circle, there is something that is going on in their mental state, meaning that we are, by our nature, social beings. We enjoy the social circles, we enjoy the conversations, we enjoy the company. When that bit by bit is removed from us and we simply don't want to see even our loved ones, I think that might be a tell-all sign that let's get some help. Let's not wait until some harm is done to the self, or God forbid, or we end up going towards numbing devices like drugs or whatever the case may be. Let's and there's nothing wrong. Even if you think that you're okay, you'll be surprised when you sit with somebody to talk what is inside of you, and let that come out, inshallah. Yeah.
So if you kind of look at it like how you would take care of your health, you would have preventative health measures. So what I mean, if you have preventative health measures for your mental health as well.
Absolutely. So let's be a little bit preemptive, right? Let's not be reactive. And I know that there are moments where I thought I was mentally strong, and when I had a talk with somebody about me, for example, because I was, the person asked me a few questions, I was like, whoa, like that, it came out of my mouth, and I was like, oh, that's inside of me. Like I didn't recognize it, and it's funny. I was talking to somebody about sometimes the wrong stuff that we do to our child, and I read a speech about that in the first 10 days about respecting your children and not stripping their dignity. And there's one person who messaged me, I'll never forget this message. They said that I received an apology from my parents, and it was an apology that I never thought I needed, but I did when I got it, right? So it's not just the idea, let's not just wait for us to hit rock bottom to call for help. It's okay to once in a while do a little bit of a check on our mental health. And inshallah, if you have a supportive spouse and you have a good family unit, understanding parents and a close-knit bond with some friends or some siblings, then it's okay to kind of reach out and like you said, be preemptive and be a little bit productive and not reactive, inshallah.
Yeah, and then you touched on a very important topic right now about, not humiliating a child. And, when, I'm thinking of ISM, like in our classrooms, we try and make sure that our teachers understand that humiliating a child is something that is completely unacceptable. And the goal of that is to foster a sense of belonging and acceptance in our holy places, in our centers, in our mosques, that our kids should come to the center or attend classes and feel like this is a safe place.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, sometimes it can be a little hostile.
Right. Exactly. And to credit these madrasa teachers, they're not professional teachers, they're volunteers, and that's why it's important that at ISM or at any really institution that's doing that kind of Sunday school madrasa type of setup, you do have constant teachers training as much as you can, and not just once a year, not in the beginning or not in the middle, but constantly, and kind of remind them that look, the hurmat and the dignity of a believer, be it an 8-year-old believer or an 88-year-old believer, is something that is to be respected and upheld. I agree. I have had talks up and down this pandemic with 24, 25-year-olds, and a lot of their take on the deen dates back to, surprisingly, their Sunday school experiences, right? And it's a little bit of a cop-out sometimes, I find, that I don't pray namaz because my grade 4 dinya teacher wasn't a good person. That's a little bit of a stretch for me, but it does have an impact, right? And those things do kind of stand out. And so we have to be a little bit careful. Yes, I agree.
And then when you look at the greater community, there is a whole lot of judgment that's there when you think of the non-traditional, members. I mean, our centers are sort of these little global microcosms where we kind of see things as our neighborhood in Pakistan or India or Iran, but we have such a changing face of, participants in our community, whether they are converts, reverts, and third generation, folks who have, whose grandparents were born and raised in America, single parents, so I think there is a greater acceptance that needs to also happen.
Yes, I totally agree. And I've addressed this multiple times up and down my lectures about, the need for a lack of judgment. The Prophet of Allah, the Imams were so approachable by all sorts of different people. Never looking at the person's apparent, look, maybe he has a weird hairstyle, maybe he has a few extra piercings, maybe his clothes are one size too tight, who knows? But they come to the center looking for some salvation sometimes. Maybe they come to the center saying, this is the last door of hope that I have. And they walk in, and of course somebody, makes some, passive aggressive comment, or somebody, looks at them the wrong way, or flat out says, you shouldn't be wearing that in the mosque. And I understand the upholding of the culture is absolutely important. Like I said, I'm a typical, Pakistani a kid. I was also, and I have the utmost respect for those values, but not at the expense of a person's dignity and their self-respect. I think that's, we need to be a little bit now tolerant and understand the era that we live in. Like it or not like it, that's where we are right now. And we can try to force the issue and lose generations, or we can, be a little bit more open-minded and tolerant and understand this is not a deal breaker, right? If the guy's coming in with a little bit of a longer hair than usual, it's not a deal breaker. He's here, welcome him, break some bread, offer some tea. Who knows, right? Maybe he'll keep coming, inshallah.
Yeah, and that's like the empathy that you were speaking
Absolutely,
about.
absolutely. It's hard to, as I said, it's really hard to empathize with others when we are just trying to get through the day with ourself, right? And it's such a difficult era. It's such a hard era to live. We live in such an individualistic era because that's what's been presented to us. Don't worry about anybody else. Mind your own business. To each his own. He'll figure it out. You just worry about yourself, right? And this pandemic has kind of forced that issue, right? And it's really kind of converted each home into the moment center, right? So the community now has gone from the building, let's say, to your four walls inside your home. So your salat and your in Muharram and Safar, your azadari, your jashan, all of it happens now inside the four walls. Anyways, so the point is, yes, we need to empathize, and it doesn't take much today to make somebody feel like you're thinking about them. One line of a text, right? Maybe a drop off of, I don't know, a fruit basket or something, or I don't know, a box of kajurs or something. It doesn't matter really. It's just the idea that someone else thought about me, right? That's really, really important. And you never know, that person could be drowning, and that was the life jacket that they needed at that moment.
Yeah. Right. Okay.
We could talk for hours about this topic, unfortunately, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I wanted to also ask you about setting boundaries, because, and I know this could be an entire seminar on boundaries, setting boundaries, but we see amongst so many, volunteers at the center, or even in their homes, when do you know when to say no, to say, I need to take care of my own mental wellness, because we have this drilled in our brains that we can't be selfish, that when it comes to the center, drop everything and just do, and I find myself in that situation a lot of times where, my work for the center is taking over my home life, or, and whether it be, people are so stressed at home, or they've got remote school going on in one corner, they've got, people's jobs happening in one corner, and then the household duties and little kids running around, and so the stress level can be unbearable. So
yeah, it's a lot.
So could you talk a little bit about?
Sure, of course. I think that one thing, and you're right, this is a seminar by itself, but I think one thing that we do lack, it's a shame that we lack it, because we do lack balance in our life, right? We lack the mentality of balance. Mind you, I find that that is a very individual measurement, Sister Farah. I think that, if you find that, your spouse and your children, are not getting enough time with you because you're constantly at the center, then number one is that you should recognize maybe I need to ease up a little bit and balance my time out. I do have people at home who depend on me. I'm not talking about a meal or a clean house, but just love, affection, communication, companionship. And there are moments and seasons where the center now requires more time from me. I'm assuming that right now things are quite quiet in the communities after Ayami Azah. Rabi Awal and Rabi Thani usually are quieter months, but Sunday school still goes on, and there's still syllabus, and there's still textbooks, and there's still teachers, and et cetera, et cetera. So I do think that yes, it's important that we need to balance out. Mind you, I've seen individuals actually treat their mental health disorders through service to the community. So what may seem like this guy who's always at the center, you ask him, he'll say it's never enough. Now, mind you, I've seen it as well, I'm sure so have you, that while he is perfecting the center, his own home is in complete shambles, right? His marriage is on the rocks. His kids are not in the path, but hey, he's keeping the entire center, mashallah, afloat, and he is, he's the hero of the community. But a lot of that is maybe hiding out from his problems at home. So I mean, I'm everywhere right now, but I think that it is an individual measurement. If you find that I'm being pulled by too many things, your priority, not you, and one's priority is the family, for sure, especially during this very difficult time. We have a Christmas break coming up in about a month, and we had all these plans to travel this year and take the kids somewhere warm and blah blah blah, because our winters are brutal in Toronto. And just the thought of the fact that I can't take my kids out anywhere is killing me. And trying to figure out how can I keep them sane by, because there are people who like to get out of the house and interact, and they love, and I just, I have to think about ways to do that. As a father, I have to think about ways to do that. I'm not jumping on a plane anytime soon, and it's So I mean, I do think that there is an absolute imbalance. I find people on two extremes. One extreme is that they actually cure themselves and strengthen themselves through service, and khidmat is an amazing thing. At the same time, I find others who are, who don't face the reality of their issues by, instead they drown themselves inside the center, right? And their wife complains, their husband complains, their kids complain. He's everyone's dad, but he's not our dad. He's everyone's husband, but he's not my husband. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, it's just something that's completely like shared by everybody, right? And it's not right.
It almost serves as an enabler.
Yes, yeah, it does. Yeah, it does. You're right.
Okay.
Because the community. I'm sorry, the community. They'll keep asking, right? They'll ask for every inch of your blood and your sweat and your tears, right? It's never enough, right? If you give them like 23 hours, they'll complain about the 24th hour sometimes. So you have to be able to say this is how much I can give. I can't give any more than this, right? Yeah.
Okay. Do we have time for one more question?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. Someone has sent in this question. How does one approach a community member when it's a very personal, you want to approach them for help, but it's considered, like ghar ki baat, or like a very personal thing, and then you're like, whoa. And there are families where, or individuals where everyone knows that they need help, but no one is going to say it because they're like, I don't want to get involved, So how do you balance that? I mean, that's a really valid concern and struggle that a lot of people have in our communities.
So let me understand. So this is a person who is asking on behalf of somebody else. Is that what you're asking me? Like there is a person in the community who needs help. How do we approach that person?
Yeah, how do you approach a person who might need help without seeming like you're getting into their personal business?
Okay, so let's go back to some of the principles of the deen. Okay, there's a beautiful wajib concept called amr bil ma'ruf. Okay, and we translate it as enjoining the good. Basically, it's being there for each other. Okay, Al-mu'minun wal-mu'minat ba'aduhum awliya'u ba'd. Okay, the believing men, the believing women, for each gender are friends of each other. They're there for each other. Okay. What makes you kuntum khayra ummatan ukhrajat linnas ta'muruna bil ma'ruf wa tanhauna 'anil munkar. What makes you the best of nations, God says, from amongst everybody, is that you are there for each other. Now, it's wajib, no doubt, but it's wajib based on conditions. Okay. The first condition is that you have to be so comfortable and close with the person that when you do approach them, they know it comes from a very loving environment. They're not going to shun you, close the door, how dare you, who do you think you are, none of your business. If you feel like I'm not that close to this person, the person A in my community needs help, I know they're going through drug abuse, they're being abused at home, God forbid. I know that they're riddled with depression. Their posts on social media are very, very dangerous. I wonder if I disappeared, would anybody notice? Or Bob, all these things are tell all signs that something is not right, but you're not that close to them. In fact, you've identified the fact that if I do say something, it might actually create damage. At that moment, the Deen says to remain quiet and find an indirect way for help. Okay. If that means that you reach out to a sibling, a friend, a cousin of theirs, then so be it. Maybe others can't see what you see. Maybe there are people who see an eye for these things. Many times people have made me aware of things that have been there in front of me, but I didn't know. I couldn't see it. Right? And they would send me screenshots of their Instagram posts, for example. And there is a common theme of a cry for help there. Right? So number one is, if you are not as close to this person, and you know this person will snap at you, say, "Hey, tum kon hoti ho? Who are you?" Then you cannot say anything directly. Okay. If you are really looking to help, it's indirect. One of the ways is programs like this. One of the ways is reaching out to somebody who is a common friend, for example. But if you identify that I am close to this person, and I know that my words have an impact on them, I have their ear, it becomes wajib on you to reach out. And you simply come at them straight. If you ask me, say, "Look, I'm noticing that something isn't right with you. Are you okay? Is everything all right?" And all I'm asking you guys to do is keep the door open a little bit. That's it. Just keep the door open a little bit. The first reaction might be, yeah, things are good. Don't worry about it. I'm good. Yeah, I'm fine. Trust me, I'm fine. You know they're not fine. But all you've done now is you've let them know that I've noticed something is not right. And you reassure them that you are their safe zone. No judgment, nothing, right? This is not some confessional or anything. No, I love you. I care about you. You're my best friend. You're my younger sister. You're my spouse. You're my first cousin. If you need anything at all, I'm always here for you. It sounds very cliche. It goes a very long way. I've done this myself. I've reached out to people that I thought I was close to. They said, "No, thank you. I'm fine, Maulana. Don't worry about it." 6 months, 8 months, a year later, sister, they'll actually recall that 2-minute conversation. "Do you remember that time that I go, "Yes, of course I remember." "Well, you know what? I need some help now." "Okay, let's talk about this." All you can do is crack the door open a little bit. They have to walk through that door, right? But if that door is closed, if you think, "Oh, they're going to snap at me and they're going to sit there and, this and that," those thoughts, again, go back to empathy. Put aside those issues and just come directly at them and say, "Look, something to me isn't right. Are you okay? You've lost weight. There's like bags under your eyes. You're very quiet. Something isn't right. Your post on social media doesn't look good. Blah, blah, blah. What's going on?" "Nothing. I'm fine. Just going through some stress." "Okay. If you need anything at all, I'm there." And that's all you can do. And you have to be okay with the fact that that's all you can do.
Yeah. And not take a hostile response personally.
No,
A lot
yes,
of
thank
times,
you. Because
yeah.
think about it. The person feels sometimes like, whoa, like they're backing me into a corner, right? And like a boxing analogy is that when you're backed in the corner, the first thing you do is you come out swinging, right, to defend yourself, to get yourself out of the corner. So yeah, you could even hear some backlash. They could snap at you. Let them do that. Knowing full well that your words now have entered their system, and that's all you can do. It's bound to echo one day, someday, and they might even open the door, and that's what you want. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Maulana Syed Jafri. You know, this dialogue is such an important one, and it's also important for the whole community to understand that we're not pinpointing one community. This is like the human condition that we're
Of
talking
course,
about,
of course.
especially during COVID.
Yeah,
So this is stuff that, you know, we're all in the same boat, and you know, when it comes down to it, you cannot pour from an empty cup. You know, I mean, if you don't take care of your wellness, then you don't have much to give to your family, to your dean, to your center.
yeah.
So thank you so much for enlightening us today. Um, it was really important, and we really, really appreciate you being the first speaker in our wellness series.
Oh, thank you so much. Like I said in the beginning, this is such a beautiful initiative and one that I hope happens more than once a year. And I want to really congratulate you and your team on this initiative. And I think that, the speakers you chose following me, Maulana Hali Yassin and Sayyid Rizwan, excellent speakers, and I think that, they will absolutely add more than I did to this series. But, I think it is important. And yes, slowly, bit by bit, we'll remove the taboo and we'll make people who have not given this topic any importance, some importance. I pray to Allah that He accepts your efforts and the team and the team's efforts. And once again, thank you for including me. May Allah bless you, you in Dallas, all of you, and please stay safe. We worry about you guys here in Canada, man. We really worry about you guys in the U.S. This post-election drama and the COVID cases, and so we're sending du'as your way from Toronto, inshallah.
Thank you so much. And we're very envious of you Canadians many times. So, but thank you so much. And I think we can end the session reciting Surah Fatiha for all of those who have lost their lives due to the pandemic and due to the mental health issues due to the lockdown. So we'll end with that, and be safe, be well, and everyone should remember that no matter what, you're not alone.
Absolutely.
We're all in this together.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, sister. Thank you.
Thank
Assalamu
you very
alaikum wa
much.
rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.